approval of minutes from June 19. If there's any changes to those minutes?
I make a motion we approve them as submitted.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, likewise. Minutes are approved. Mr. Lewis, what is the first item of business, please?
Yes, Chairman Cantrell. The first item on the agenda is the 550 East Main Street. The owner is Amy Hennington. They're requesting to remove approximately 1 to 1.5 feet of existing siding above the front porch and continue it's called fish scale decorative siding in the white trim across the front of the house that's fronting on East Main Street. This house is located at the southwest corner of East Main Street and University Street. It was constructed in 1895 in the Queen Anne Colonial Revival style of architecture. It's got a classical porch, barge boards, decorative shingles. It's 2 stories, clapboard, and it's got a gable roof. And it's a contributing structure in the East Main Street Historic District of the National Register of Historic Places. Like I mentioned earlier, due to the water damage from just weather and years, they're undertaking the repairing of the porch on the front, as you can see on the monitor above and in your agenda package. During the repairing, they're having to install some flashing against the house, and instead of reinstall clapboard siding that is currently up on the house, they would like to continue the fish scale siding above the porch. That'll be like a ribbon across the front, the top of the porch across the front of the house. In your agenda packages, I think you have some additional pictures, photographs of some more fish scale siding that's on different sides of the house. Another picture that I have on the monitor up here, if we can take a look at it, is some more fish scale siding. And it's not coming up yet, but anyway, they have fish scale siding on the rear of the house and on the sides of the house, and I think I have some samples, maybe some actual photographs of this. They may not have gotten in your package. I'm going to pass those back to them. Like I say, what they're wanting to do is continue the fish scale siding above the porch. The picture that you see on the monitor shows the railing that is on top of that was on top of the roof. They have taken that down to do the repairs, and it's really difficult to see with the railing on there, and you can barely see it without the railing. And one additional thing that they're wanting to do is, during the repairs of this porch, they would like to leave the railing off until such time as they can do to reinstall railing back onto the second floor. And in your pictures, I think I included in your agenda package another picture that shows the front of the house that depicts the house before that actual railing was installed. I think it was installed in 1992 or in the 90s. It's been up there for a while. And they would like to leave it down until such time as they can put new siding, or that not siding, but the railing back up. So what we're looking at today is just the fish scale siding itself. And I talked with the building and codes director about the codes issues leaving leaving the railing off, and they have exterior doors to that second floor porch. And as long as the applicants, they have deadbolts installed on their doors, and as long as they have them in actual working condition, then they can lock the doors to those exterior doors that lead to the porch. Then building codes is okay with that. So With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is in the audience also.
Okay, clarify, so the request is to allow the railing to remain off, correct?
Yeah,
And the second request then would be to add the fish scaling along just that little front piece through there, 18 inches in height,
right.
to match the existing fish scaling on the, I guess, the right-hand side of the house under the double window.
Mm-hmm.
And so the addition would be, the fish scaling would be in here.
Right,
Is that correct?
right. And there's some additional pictures in your agenda packages that show that
Right. And then there's
Right.
fish scaling also on other parts of the house
on
currently.
other sides of the house, on, in fact, all sides of the house.
So
have
it's
that.
just in this area
Right,
that would occur.
right.
Okay?
Robert, you said that the railing was not original to the house?
No, it wasn't. It was installed in, I want to say 1992, I think it was 1992 or 99. But they went through the Historic Commission to get it installed, and it was approved. But since then, they've had some problems with weathering, and it's deteriorated such that they're having to doing some major repairs to the porch. So they had to take it down in order to do this.
Ms. Hennington, anything you would like to add to your request? And please state your name, please.
Amy Hennington. Really, Robert explained everything. In terms of the fish scale, it really is just a very narrow piece. Those fish scales are around the perimeter of the entire house except for one little section just right in the middle of that upstairs front porch. And so since I had to take the siding off to continue with the roof project, the siding had to come off anyway, and I hadn't really thought about it, but once I found out that it had to come off, it's like, why not go ahead and continue the fish scales around the entire perimeter and just give it a consistent look. In terms of the railing, there are some additional complicating factors to putting it up right now. One of the issues that caused the roof damage was that the deck that was there was a traditional deck that was just laid on top of a flat tin roof. And so it was joists and nails and all of that. And the joists and that framing actually created an opportunity for leaves and debris and water to pool underneath that deck, which didn't create the problems. It was a seam in the original tin roof that really created the damage. But having all of that under there certainly exacerbated the problem and created some additional ones. The roofing solution that I've put on, which is essentially an EDPM roof, it's a layer of rubber is there now. And with that EDPM, I can't go back and put the same type of deck back on top of that because any nails that go through that void the warranty and kind of defeat the purpose of fixing the roof, which was the primary concern, given that is an original structure and the water was doing significant damage to the beadboard roof of the front porch. So it's going to take some additional expense and some specialized materials to go back and restore that railing. And the upstairs porch it's definitely on my long-term list of things to do, but due to the special considerations that I have to make now, it's just kind of cost prohibitive to do it at the moment, but I have grand plans for it. It's just not practical to do it right now, and I can't go back with the same type of solution that was on there originally.
Right.
That's really it, unless y'all have other questions.
So Amy, so you have not determined what you're going to put on top of the rubberized material at this
Well,
point?
what my roofing company has suggested is they're rubber pavers that my understanding is they're about 2 inches thick. As a matter of fact, we're leaving enough space at the bottom of the work that we're doing so that in a few years I can go back and do this and that we will have planned for it. And those pavers are, my understanding, in my mind, it's almost like they're, the bottom of them are almost like a Lego. It's on these columns that allow for effective drainage so that we won't run into the same issues. But it's just going to take a lot of them, and they're expensive. And we also have to take some special considerations in terms of how we're going to put the posts that any railing would attach to. Since we aren't going to have joists, we aren't going to be able to actually nail them to something without. My roofing company could probably give a better description of that, but we're going to have to handle that in a special way too. That it complicates it, but most important to me, it fixes the structural issues with the original front porch, which was suffering from the way that it was. And hopefully those issues, the roofers are done with the exception of gutter installation, so that those problems have been addressed now.
Just FYI to the board, if you haven't picked up on it, you can't see the roof from the street. The top of the roof, the material. And so I was curious as to what the fix was, because there's a lot of flat roof porches in the district, and so it's good to know how some of it's being fixed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my comment was, in looking, I had forgotten that the house, and originally did not have a railing on that porch. Mm-hmm. And in looking at the photos of the original house, it's a nice, clean look without that railing.
Mm-hmm. If you want long-term grand plans, if I was going to go back and put a railing on it, my goal would be to do a more detailed, more appropriate to the period. There's an amazing keyhole pattern on the interior stairs that when I get to putting the railing back up and reinstating it to a porch, because I definitely want to do that, I would like to look at a more decorative, detailed design that would mirror that keyhole effect that's on the inside stairs. I would like to bring that outside and have that as well. I think that's more appropriate to the period. I know when we were having the conversation with Gary Whitaker the other day, he said that would be more appropriate to the period than what it was that I just took down.
I had one question for you as well. Are the fish scale, is the fish scale siding hard to come by?
We're milling it. You just said we're using poplar, and even across the front of the house, I think the pictures that are in the packet probably show it a little bit better than the picture from the. We're making them by hand. Even on the front of the house, there's the section on the left and the section on the right were already fish scale. It really is just that one little section in the center, and the originals, we weren't able to keep those. I have them just because I wanted to keep them, but we can't put them back up. But we're making them out of poplar, which would have been the original material.
I see.
And they're cutting them out as they're attaching them, and the new scales are already on the parts of the house where they were there before. It's just that middle section where the cosmetic changes that I'm waiting on the approval for.
Well, I think it's wonderful that you have gone to all that trouble and expense to get the house looking like it
I'm trying
like it did initially.
It's a labor of love for certain.
You've done
y'all all know that.
You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Looks like it's a pretty minimal situation with the fish scale, and if there's going to be a motion, I wish we would make it in two pieces, the railing and then the fish scaling, or either way. I think would be appropriate.
You want to do it in two?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the fish scale. I make a motion we approve the fish scale as submitted.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Becker. Any second?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Belcher. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion passes. Now, in regards to the railing, which should we like to leave down for a period of time?
Well, I'll make a motion regarding the railing that we approve the right not to rebuild it at this time, since the original home did not have the railing. And if the Henningtons decide they want to then add the railing down the road, that they bring that style to us for approval.
Got a motion by Mr. Becker again. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wade. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, likewise. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, what is the next item on the agenda, please?
Next item on the agenda is an explanation of the agricultural specifications and standards of practice for public property in the city of Murfreesboro. And I don't want to say that twice. Back in May 27th of 2010, the City Council adopted an ordinance 10-0-09, which amended the city code pertaining to changes to public property in the historic district within Murfreesboro. A couple of months ago, I got a call about some trimming and cutting of trees in the historic district, and I looked into it and found that Asplund was contracted by MED to do some tree trimming, in which they do all over Murfreesboro, and they happen to be in on Lytle Street, I think is where they were located then. And I looked into it and found out that they were making changes to the landscaping in the historic district in the right-of-way, which falls into this the ordinance that was passed by the City Council back a couple of years ago. So, in looking at it, I contacted MED and asked them if they would like to come over and explain to the commission what they're doing, what they have yearly, not yearly, but periodically they prune trees throughout the town, throughout the city of Murfreesboro, and they are within the right-of-way. So they have a project where they do periodically trimming trees throughout the city. Excuse me. And this is to keep the power on, and they have a 3 or 4 year cycle in which they do this, and in order to fulfill the requirements of this ordinance, they can explain better than I can what they do in all over town and sometimes inside the historic district. And what, like I say, what they do is, in order for their power lines to stay free of trees and to stay running, they periodically trim these trees. And so, with that being said, we have Mr. Steve Sachs and Mr. Jackie Whitaker, excuse me, from MED, and they're here to answer any questions you might have regarding their policy of trimming trees throughout the city, and which includes the historic district.
Mr. Sachs or Mr. Whitaker, would you either one like to elaborate a little bit further?
I'll be glad to. Thanks for this opportunity. We'd like to say we have the other, better Whitaker. Gary Whitaker and Jackie Whitaker are brothers, and Jackie's our superintendent of operations, so we're awful proud of him. Thanks for inviting me. This started, as Mr. Lewis said, some time ago, a few months ago. Actually, there was a phone call. I believe Mr. Lewis called Jackie Whitaker and said, we need to talk about tree trimming in the historic district. And we need you not to trim any particular areas without approval of the Historic Commission. And maybe I heard that wrong, but it was something kind of, well, wait a minute, we got to cut trees and we got to keep the lights on, so maybe we need to talk a little bit. And then I think we got a letter maybe in May from Mr. Lewis that kind of outlined this the city ordinance. We were aware of the ordinance. My recollection of that ordinance was when one of the other city departments decided to do some changes to a brick sidewalk in the Historic Commission, and they either dug up a sidewalk or were in the process of digging up a sidewalk, and it caused a lot of confusion and concern. And maybe the brick sidewalk came up and a concrete sidewalk went in, and that didn't quite fit. So, I understand, what was there. But I wanted to just spend a few minutes this morning and this afternoon and talk a little bit about our philosophies, what we do and what we're trying to do, and see if we can reach some common ground here on our mission. Clearly, as I like to say a lot, clearly power lines and trees haven't mixed from the days of Tom Edison in New York when he built the first direct current lighting in downtown Manhattan. It's just a phenomena of the business that we have to keep vegetation away from these power lines. Probably the biggest change in our industry occurred in 2003, and some of you may remember or have had friends involved in what we now call the biggest, largest blackout known to the Eastern Coast, when in 2003 the entire East Coast went black for about 4 days. 50 million people were affected by that blackout, and over $2 billion worth of economies were shut down, while that whole huge grid got knocked out and took 4 days to recover. We were very fortunate here in the Tennessee Valley area to be prevented from that huge blackout, although it was headed our direction. Only saved by a smart young fella sitting at the TVA Intertie in Chattanooga, who saw lots of strange things going on above us and decided that he was going to open that Intertie up in a second. Had he not done that, we would be talking about the 2003 blackout and how it affected the Tennessee Valley area. Lots of people did lots of work trying to figure out what caused that and how to prevent it. I'm here to tell you that First Energy, the power provider in the Detroit, Michigan area, did not do proper tree trimming, and one of their power lines, due to a load problem, actually sagged below its normal level, got into some trees that were underneath the power line because they weren't trimming trees, and it caused that cascading event that went all the way up into Canada and all the way back through New York, the Niagara Intertie, all the way back down through Boston, down through New York, down through New Jersey, and headed to the Tennessee Valley area, and we stopped it at the Pennsylvania Intertie. So everybody got concerned and everybody got worried about how we're maintaining our power line right-of-ways, and lots of legislation has since been introduced on a federal level mandating and telling us all how we have to maintain our right-of-ways. So with that, we do come under some federal regulations. We are part of the TVA power system, and TVA does have some monitoring on our work that we do. Bringing it down a little bit closer to home, the state of Tennessee has a law on the books that requires electric companies to cut trees up to 10 feet away, minimum 10 feet away from the power line. So there's a state law that says we can cut beyond that, but we've got to keep them 10 feet away from the power lines. Why would the state of Tennessee have such a law? It's part of the same cascading events to keep the power companies, to force the power companies to do the job they need to do. Bringing it back home here in Murfreesboro, we do cut trees, and we do cut trees on a regular basis. We have a contract crew. Asplin is our contract crew right now, and they've been with us for quite a while. Jackie oversees the folks that do that work on a weekly basis. And we cut from about 12 feet to about 15 feet away from the tree, so that as the tree grows, we stay outside of that 10-foot sphere around the power line. That gives us a chance to cut, come back 3 years later and cut again. And so far that's been very successful in all the areas we've worked. Now, that's our maintenance work. When we have storm damages, we do everything and anything we can, frankly, to get the power back on. So big tree falls, knocks down the power line, we'll go in, we'll cut the power line clear, we'll cut the tree up. Most of the time the tree's out of the ground, and so it just needs to be cut up, and we'll do that. Most cases the homeowner makes arrangements to have the tree moved. If the tree's blocking the road, then we'll make arrangements to have the tree moved off to the side of the road. I want to try to, Mr. Lewis and the Commission, I want to try to differentiate between maintenance work and emergency work, because we do two different things. As we trim, we now fall under another set of rules and regulations, and that's the city's arborist. We have Cynthia Holloway involved with the city urban forest. She has worked on very specific policies. The council's adopted those on how we trim, the way we do it to protect the health and the vitality of the urban forest. Cynthia does monitor our work. She makes recommendations with us, and she and Jackie and our contractors meet from time to time to discuss issues and problems. But there are good ways of doing this, and there's ways that are dangerous to the trees, and we want to make sure that we're not doing that. Our contractor, Asplin, actually has a on-board arborists that work with them. They're a huge multinational company, as you know. They have their own arborists that work and inspect the work we do, and actually train the folks that work for us. So they go through a training process to make sure they know how to maintain the power line right away that we need, but protect the health of the tree. We respect the interest and recognize the interest of the Historic Commission. Frankly, we try to cut with scissors instead of chainsaws. We try to cut very selectively and very carefully as we cut through the Historic Commission. But at the end of the day, our work has to be done. I want to take a sidestep a minute and tell you that in the past 3 or 4 years, we tackled another power problem involving underground power lines, because so many times cutting trees leads us to a discussion about underground power. So we're going to go there. I'm going to take that walk with you. And what we discovered was electric cables that we had installed 20 years ago, 25 years ago, were reaching the end of their life. We were told they'd be good for 20 years, and they were good for 20 years, and they started to fail. That's what they told us, and that's what happened. And so based on the outages we were having, the problems we discovered, our board granted my request to spend about $2 million, and we began to replace all of the old power lines in the older sections of town. And we learned an awful lot about directional boring and how to get them out, how to get them in, how to do it right. And I'm pleased to report that we've got a lot of older neighborhoods in Murfreesboro that have a brand new looking power system. Looks just like the one that's at my house. And I'm pleased to report we've had no failures with that. In the process, we learned how to do a lot of very highly skilled work that we'd never been asked to do before. And once we had that capacity, we went back to our board and asked them to allow me to do a few pilot projects where we could take neighborhoods block by block, street by street, and do an overhead to underground conversion. Because in fact, the more of those lines we can get out of the air and put in the ground, the less tree trimming we have to do. And we believe we have a process developed that is highly reliable and highly effective. And one day we'll talk about Murfreesboro being a completely underground community where we'll have power lines to look at, poles to look at, and trees to trim. So that's the big picture that we'd like to talk about. And so if you had a picture of the historic district, Chairman Cantrell, and you threw a dart at that and said, where's the place we ought to start that process, I bet you'd want to do it on Cherry Lane. And so we went over to Cherry Lane, and we spent a year working with the homeowners And I signed one of my young, bright engineers, and I said, work this out with the neighborhood. We want to do this. And we discovered an interesting process there that while we have a lot of consensus on Cherry Lane not to cut trees, we don't have a consensus on putting it underground, because at some point you got to have a transformer, and it has to be somewhere. If we're going to take it off a pole, we got to put it on a box somewhere, and that's got to be someplace. And yeah, we can put 4 or 5 houses off of one, but it still has to go somewhere. We thought it would be good to get it out of the backyards and put it in the front yards where we could get to it from the street and never have to go there again. If you drove into my neighborhood, you'd see these little transformer boxes scattered all over the neighborhood, and you can put fences around them and shrubs around them and kind of disguise them a little bit. That didn't seem to quite work so well. And then we had a problem with the city upgrade itself. If you go in and I take the meter box off your house and we put in an underground meter box, you may have to go inside the house and rewire to the switch box. Well, as soon as you move to the inside of the house, Gary, Jackie's bigger brother Gary, comes into play, and he met with us numerous times, and there's just new codes and new regulations that you have to abide by. You have to have smoke detectors in your house. You have to have certain standards in your wiring, and even Gary was gracious enough to give us some room there. There was still work that the homeowners had to do in rewiring the outside of their house and rewiring maybe to the inside. And frankly, they just said, it's not our problem. Don't cut my trees, but don't want to put it underground if it's going to cost me money. Y'all ought to do it all yourselves. So we were a little bit stopped in our tracks, and we looked around, and actually we moved off of Cherry, and we went to Park Circle. And I don't know if any of you live on Park Circle, but we went to Park Circle. The homeowners were cooperative, and we took down the power lines and put them underground to the homes. We put up some new lights. We took the lights down, put up new lights, and I haven't heard any complaints, and I don't know that the power's been off yet. So there is some dynamics at play here. Still want to do some pilot projects. We were looking at how to get back to Cherry Lane and maybe come to the Planning Commission or the Historic Commission or the City Council or somewhere for some help. And I got invited to a meeting about Manny Street, and Mr. Becker was talking to me about the lights on Manny just a little while ago, and Manny just looked like a great place to try it again. And so the city wanted us to do some changes to the way the power lines were there, and they kind of wanted me to take all the power lines down, put them underground, and then go about 5 feet off the street and go back up to a pole and then feed all the houses overhead after we just spent all this money to go do all this underground work. And I was kind of confused at why we were doing underground overhead, just to be honest with you. So several meetings, discussions, and sorry, we don't have any money to help you, but whatever you want to do, you can do. And so again, the Power Board made a decision, and we spent the money. We did it all underground, as you know. And what we actually worked out here with our homeowners is those people that were willing to change out their meter bases and run their wires inside the house and meet whatever new codes and regulations there were very successful. Some of those folks either didn't have the money or didn't want to do the money, and we came up with an adaptive process where we could take down this pipe that ran up the outside of the house, took it off, and somehow repiped that underground. And probably not the best looking way of doing it, but at least it works and the power's back on. So we're kind of proud of Manny. We think it looks good, even though maybe my lights are a little too bright. They are the lights we used at the Avenue, and they are our standard now, our new standard stand light. I go through there from time to time and kind of smile, because I think I think it's starting to set the stage for maybe a new way of doing things in Murfreesboro. One of the things we worry about, that I guess for those of you who may have known me and when I had a full head of hair and wasn't gray, and, now it's all gone. We really don't know, frankly, what's happening in our homes. We don't want to know, and we really don't know much. People will call and say, man, you can't turn my lights off right now. My mother's on a respirator. I brought my grandmother home to live with us, and she's on a heart monitor, and we just don't really know. And so we've worked real hard and struggled real hard to improve our reliability. I'd like to say some of you can't remember the last time your power was off. I'm not sure I can really remember when mine was off. We have strived to reach the highest quartile there is in benchmarking our utility. So we're proud to talk about 99.998% reliability. We've hit that for the last 3 years now, and that puts us in the highest quartile of all the utilities in the country. So something we're doing works, and part of that's tree trimming. Last Thursday night we had a storm and only 100 customers were out of power. So we kind of have demonstrated the need to trim trees. We're not going to back off that. We think it has to be done. We recognize and agree that there's ways of doing it maybe better, maybe easier than we're doing. I can't promise you this, but I can tell you that we'll give attention to the historic district. And maybe, and Jackie and I have talked about this, maybe instead of making a 3-year cycle, we need to make a 2-year cycle, Mr. Ives, and not cut so much each year, but just in the historic district, because of its nature and because of its designation, maybe do a little less cutting each time we do and do it more often, which means our trucks are going to be out there more, but it's not going to, when we leave, it's not going to be quite as noticeable. That's all I've got to present. I really wanted to make this a two-way dialogue, and from what I've heard, I know you're not bashful. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you and see what questions they have, and I'll bring Jackie up here because he'll probably have all the real answers. So, thank you for your time and thank you for your attention. And I want this to be a partnership, not a confrontational thing, and I don't think it is, and I'm not taking it that way. So that's why I wanted to come and make sure we got this started in the right way.
Mr. Chairman, I made copies of the Tennessee Code 68-103-103, which mandates the 10-foot clearance. I'll pass that out for members.
Okay, thank you. That was a very good presentation, Mr. Sachs. I do have a question, but it's for Mr. Lewis and or Mr. Ives. And that would be, is this an informative session to the Historic Zoning Commission, or is there an action that will be needed for us regarding this issue?
I guess I take this more as an informative session. The ordinance that was passed a couple years ago about utility work within the Historic Commission does exempt, I think, what we would consider routine maintenance and repairs. And for some of us, routine maintenance is weekly or monthly or every few months. And with this situation with MED and tree trimming, every 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever years is routine. And, of course, that's a little different, I think, for what most of us would think of as routine maintenance. And so when the issue came up there a couple months ago, I wanted Steve and Jackie to come and explain what they do, how they do it, why they do it. And I think it's great if they could, historic district's not all that large, if they could work in that area so every 2 years instead of every 3 or 4 as they do in some other areas, that would take the degree of trimming down a bit each time they do it and make it less severe, I guess you would say, in terms of the maintenance, and that would help that. But yeah, I'm really thinking that this is more of an informative session. I guess if the Commission disagrees and wants some other action, we talk about that and then see where we can get to with it. But I saw this more as an informative session.
Okay. One other question then along that lines. process of taking from overhead to underground within the district that would fall under this exemption as well?
I think when they go to underground, other than eliminating the overhead,
I'm not asking that we get into it, but
if you're not having to disturb some other function or some other accoutrement of the area, I don't know that would be something that would need to come back.
Okay.
I guess if in fact that's going to make some other change, to go through that process is going to maybe require removal of some trees or digging up some other historic feature, then maybe it would. But I think that they were accomplishing that change without disturbing any other aspect of the district. Is that correct?
Well, first of all, that's a good point, and I'm sitting here thinking a little bit out loud, so that makes me nervous when I do this. But with this new directional boring technology, you don't have much disturbance of anything. We bored under swimming pools and under sidewalks and under sewer lines, and we knew where everything was, and you can just move these things around. It's quite phenomenal. And I think what we did on Park Circle was a good example of that. All of a sudden things began to disappear and other things began to show up, and I don't remember, Jackie, any complaints or any consumers that were upset. What I'd like to suggest is if we could develop a partnership between our two departments, then we'd like to come to you and say, we'd like to do these sections. If you can help us build some energy and excitement among the homeowners, we'd be glad to come and say, here's the blocks we're going to do this year, and here's how we're going to do it, and you guys can review our plans and give us your comments. There's not an issue there with me at all. I think the historic district can come out of this a winner. It can really look like it looked before electricity was even there when we get done. I mean, that would be a wonderful goal for all of us. But we have to deal with homeowners that just either don't have the passion for it or maybe honestly don't have the money for it. I don't know.
any
I've got two questions. I appreciate the information, and it's very timely for me personally since we're on the Manny Avenue project, and the electric to our Main Street home on the corner of Manny and South Manny and Main comes off of Manny. And so your decision not to do what you did up on Middle Tennessee Boulevard by putting another pole up and then going overhead was absolutely great for our consideration. In fact, if that wasn't going to happen, we were going to be willing to pay for the underground from the street in because we didn't want another pole up with overhead lines. So that is really good news for us, and we appreciate that decision being made. As far as the underground is concerned, I am a little bit interested if you have any idea when the electric is going to be put in the tubes underground to the house, which has not been done yet.
I'm going to turn that one over to Jackie. The schedule of when the service is going to be run, when the service is
The tubes are underground, but AT&T and Murfreesboro Electric have not put the electric underground to the house. That's not happened yet.
To yours.
To any of them, as far as I know.
The underground, the pole line is still there. We're waiting on AT&T to remove their facilities. As far as I understand, we're pretty well finished with our part.
Now, you better check back into it, because when the electric contractor, and you have a contractor out there, I can't remember the name of them, but when they put the electric line underground in the tube that's already there and then comes up, and then I have to get my electrician out to put a special box to hook to.
Right.
That has not been done.
Okay.
And so it's the only thing that's been hooked up is Comcast. So AT&T, you're right, they haven't hooked up, but neither has the electric. So, and I don't know.
Up and down Manny, most of those have been done as far as that.
Well, I don't know.
We ran conduits up the house and tied it up with existing weather heads. That's what we had to do.
Well, you're more than willing to come out and check 346 East Main Street. It's not been done.
I personally looked at several down through there. I know a lot of them.
Yeah. So.
I can't swear that all of them have, but I thought we were.
Well, I was just curious as to when, because until that happens, the poles can't come down and the last lines can't come down. 346 East Main, which is at the corner of South Manning and Main, but the electric comes off of Manning. The second question I had...
Can I add to that just
Sure.
one second? If you'll let me take that one more step.
Sure.
We had quite a tussle on that project. And again, it was one of our first, and so it's all learning curves to us. We had quite a tussle with AT&T and Comcast because we were willing to move the electric side of it, but frankly, they were just being very hard to deal with. Actually, stubborn was the word I was going to use. Is that okay? On moving the cable TV and telephone, and part of it was budgetary, and part of it was right away, and part of it was they didn't know the project was going that far. So we agreed to step up to the plate, and we actually put in conduits for both cable TV and telephone to their specifications. And then they said, if you all spend the money to do that, then they agreed to pull it in. So again, that's not typically an electric utility job, but this was not a typical utility project, and we thought a little bit of extra money, since we're going to have the ditch excavated anyway, would be warranted. So the timing of this is still we're trying to work out all the timing of it, but we'll follow it.
Comcast is hooked up. It's just electric, and AT&T haven't. So, but anyways, I will just do one addition to that. The contractor you had doing all that trench work and everything, I mean, they were absolutely great to work with, so we appreciate them working with us to make it happen. The second question I had was on the tree trimming, and I understand the necessity of having the lines clear, so that's not even an issue. But it seems to me that in some cases the trimming that has to take place looks so bad that if it was one of my trees, I'd rather just have the tree taken down so you don't ever have to trim it again, and find a tree that's not going to grow up into the lines and put that in place of it. Has there been any discussion along those lines?
Let me take that first, because I'm so glad you brought that up. I missed that. Our chairman has challenged Jackie and I with exactly that issue this year. Dr. Jean Ann Rogers is our chairman, and she has met with Jackie and I on a number of occasions and asked us and challenged us actually to come up with a program to do exactly what you said. Typically, we don't take the tree down because we can trim it in, say, an hour. If we have to take the whole tree down, chop it up, and get it out of there, now we're spending 3 or 4 hours, and that's not part of our contract. But she's asked us to come up with a way of doing that and how much that's going to cost. And then on the second side of that is to make a recommendation on trees that could be planted under the power line that would be pretty trees but wouldn't grow as tall and wouldn't cause problems in the future. And I think Mr. Bachland and I were talking before the meeting that he worked on a project in Nashville where they were experimenting with trees and trying to find out what worked and what didn't work. So that's kind of my end of it. Jackie, you may have some more to say about it.
We don't normally remove trees, but after we trim one like that, if the customer does request it be removed, we will remove it. So we do remove some trees at the customer's request.
Yeah. Well, it seems in the long run you're going to save yourselves a lot of money because you're not going back everything.
That is true. And we do, like I said, we don't ask, they come to us, you want us to remove, and then we would.
Well, that's good to know, because I know there's a couple of trees in the historic zone that, well, I know what you have to do, but boy, it doesn't look like a tree anymore.
If it's underneath the line, there's not much.
Yeah.
To the side, you can do an L trim, and we cut to the laterals, but if it's underneath the line, it's just, there's no way to, just nothing. It really needs to be removed underneath the line.
And I would offer up this tonight, if you all want to tell us about those that you think just really detract from the view of the historic district. I don't know why they keep trimming this tree. I'll just cut it down. If you would like to send us those through Mr. Lewis, we'd be happy to, one, take a look at them, and two, make a decision whether we think we can do that and seek homeowner support of that, or we'll send you a letter back saying we can't do this for these reasons. But at the end of the day, we'd like it to look the way you want it to look, because we all live in this community and we all support this community, and I'll be honest with you, I don't get to see everything all the time. So if there's things out there that you want to bring to our attention, please feel free to do that.
The trees that are actually on the road right-of-way, the urban environmental has say-so over those, so they would be under their jurisdiction as far as that goes.
Ms. White, did you have something?
I just want to thank you for educating us, taking all this time to educate us, and I hope that a lot of residents, as this show is repeated, will get the benefit of this too, because I've learned so much. And I guess it was I 2 months ago who called Mr. Lewis, and I think I talked to Mr. Whitaker, and may have even talked to you, Mr. Sachs, because I had a resident on Cherry Lane, a friend, and who called me and said, they're up on Lytle, they're cutting down trees, they're coming around the corner, they say they're going to come.
Coming our way.
And so I said, well, let's just see what they're doing. She said, they said they're going to cut on Cherry Lane, which, that was in your, you were going to be coming down the backyards. But I think that kind of got this started with her being so cautious about the trees in her front yard. And gosh, you've really educated us. So, and for you to say that we could even come back to you and tell you how you could fine-tune some of the trees is just extra nice.
Well, no one would be more pleased in their career than me to be able to resolve the tree trimming issues on Cherry Lane. And we have really worked, I feel like, to about the end of what we can do. And I hate to say it, but one day the crews are going to be there, and people are going to say they're finally here. And we really just keep pushing that day off and off. But I wish we could get back to doing what we plan to do, which is get it all in the ground. And it's going to cost some money, and it's going to be a little bit of disturbance, but once we're done, it's all going to be done. And 50 years from now, it's all going to be done. We don't have to worry about it. And Mr. Ives and I have talked at night sometimes about what can we do with the homeowners that really legitimately don't have the funds to do whatever they got to do at their house. Can we put that in some sort of special assessment on the homes? Can we give them 10 years to pay for that instead of immediately? Can the Power Board put up a special fund somehow and let people borrow against that like we do a heat pump loan and pay that back? Can the City Council step in and regulate that and do some things? I don't know, David, whether we've really explored all that. We've talked about a lot of things, but we've never reached a conclusion. And maybe what could come out of this session is a challenge for us to meet and maybe work on some kind of a process that we all could buy in, and then take that to the council for their approval. I'm absolutely willing to put time in on that. But I think we've got a common interest here, and if we can keep working on that, we'll make Murfreesboro and the Historic District a model for the country, and I think we'd like to do that.
Since Cherry Lane doesn't want to do it, you might want to start on East Main.
Yeah, okay.
I was going to suggest Highland from Maine to...
Maybe we just box it in, and then it'll be the last one standing. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You first, ma'am.
Okay, I have questions and comments, but first of all, I'm thrilled that your board, your director, has challenged you to come up with some new ways of trimming trees, if I understood you correctly, because every time I see the Esplund trucks, I cringe, and I can't believe they have an arborist on their staff, and that arborist has never been in Murfreesboro to direct those men. I've had a horrible experience in my yard with pine trees that no longer have one branch on one side. And in other communities, and even in our county, in Rutherford County, if you drive those roads and look under the power lines, of course, years ago they started doing this, where they top the trees instead of mutilating the trees, basically, is what it amounts to. And so those trees are growing, they have spread out, but they haven't gotten tall because, of course, they continue to trim them, and they're aesthetically very pleasing. And in other cities, if you drive through, you will see the same thing. And so I've always wondered if the Esplund men have any guidance at all before they go down a street.
Don't shoot the messenger. The stub cutting a tree, and Cynthia would tell you this, is absolutely the worst thing in the world you can do to a tree. And that was a point I was going to bring up. When he says we're going to minimal cut, we have to cut to a lateral. The reason you cut to a lateral, if you cut to a lateral on a tree, the tree will naturally seal itself up, and it will not be susceptible to insects and rot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way proper trimming is what Asplund's doing. If you've got a tree right underneath the line, you have no choice but to stub cut it. But if you've got one out to the side where you can get back to the laterals, you cut off what offends you. And you don't have a problem with it again. You're not repeatedly cutting the tree, and it's healthier for the tree. I know it doesn't look, we're all about symmetrical, round and all. But as far as a tree is concerned, that's the worst thing in the world you could do. It just destroys a tree. And if you look at these trees that are underneath the line out in the county like you're talking about, they don't live long. They're subject to rot and insect infestation, and it just destroys the trees. We're trimming by the policy that Cynthia and the Urban Environmental, lets us trim by, and it's lateral trimming, and that is the proper technique to trim trees.
Okay, I don't have statistics that I can argue with you about, but I do know there are other ways to trim trees besides just cutting out the middle of them. And I agree with what Mr. Becker said. In a lot of cases, it would be nicer just to cut the tree down.
I agree 100%. Mm-hmm. And in pine trees especially, and that's a problem, that's a problem by putting a large tree next to a power line. There's eventually going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And, it's the closer you are to the power line, the more aggressive you have to be to trim it. Because last Thursday night, when that 60-mile-an-hour wind came through and we were all huddled down, our crews were out working. And if I don't do my job to make sure Asplund does their job, then your power's out, and we're out there in dangerous situations working in the middle of storms because we didn't trim the trees properly.
Right.
So,
well,
like Steve said, when we're trimming, we'll try to reduce as much as possible, but you may look up there and then you're going to call Jackie and say, Jackie, you cut too much off, and then I'll have to say, please remember my conversation on laterals. We have to go back to a lateral, which may end up being 15 feet away. But we have to go back to trim it, especially to the side when you trim and you can actually protect the tree. We have to go to that lateral, so it may be wider than that 10 feet or 12 feet that we promised.
And I know in recent years the city has been very good about suggesting trees that don't get as tall, more ornamental style trees. And so I think that's good. And when you work on your new guidelines for having suggestions for homeowners on trees that they can plant, you said you'd been challenged to come up with a new guideline. That would be good.
Yes, I believe it is.
I think some of that's on our website. He was going to let.
Okay. Okay.
There'll be more coming out. This is the beginning of this process we're working on to look at tree removal, tree planting. There's going to be several things come out of this.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Well, we know you've got a long evening, and we appreciate the invitation. Please accept my invitation, and we'll be glad to meet anytime. If you'll just invite us, we'll probably come. And if you have some things you want us to work on from this session, if you'll just send those to us through Mr. Lewis, we'll be glad to respond. And I hope we get a chance to continue this dialogue. And you know how to get a hold of me. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else from the commission regarding the power lines? Except it is informative. Okay. Mr. Lewis, do you have anything?
I don't have anything else.
Anybody on the commission have any comments? Then we'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.